With you once again, it's the Integrateness Podcast with Jason and Jolene. I'm Jason, she's Jolene. I'm an average dude, she's the professional. Together, we're an unstoppable team of self-improvement. How's that?
Oh, that might be the best one yet.
Unstoppable team of self-improvement.
Here we are. So we're like many weeks in. I want to know, like, has this changed your life, guys? Like I literally, so just before recording this, ran into someone in the hallway who said, hey, my boyfriend and I just listened to the episode yesterday, happened to be the vicarious trauma one. For those of you time frame wise wondering, a bit of a time trip here. We're ahead of time and going back to the future now. Woo. But I thought that was really cool. I've heard quite a few people who are listening to it with their partners, or they're passing it on to their kids. I want to know, we want to know, is this changing your guys' lives somehow by just connecting dots, giving you information? We just want to feed you with everything you need to start making some positive changes in your life just to live greater.
And we're not trying to do it in a way that is pretentious or preachy or snooty, because there's a lot of self-help stuff out there. I mean, there is a lot of self-help stuff out there, and there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of YouTube. Most of the people, not most, but there's a good chunk of the people out there that are trying to help you that actually aren't qualified to help anybody. They're just sharing their own tips and tricks. And we're trying to kind of balance that out with me being kind of the average guy with, you know, his own personal history, and Jolene being someone who, like everyone, has her own history, but she's made a career out of helping people, and she's got the training and the knowledge to back up what she's talking about. And that to us is very important, to kind of provide both sides of this journey to you.
Yeah, because it's more than just a mindset. You know, it really bothers me when people start thinking about like, oh, you just need to be positive. You need to make your affirmations in the morning and this and that. And then when we look at it and go, well, there's also a whole bunch of other stuff that's in the way here. And we see so much of this in our trauma processing, in grief work, in all these other layers of counseling work, where then people get discouraged when they can't just do it like everyone else is doing it, right? Like, why is this so hard for me? I must be so flawed. So thanks for acknowledging that there, Jason, because I'm like a huge research nerd, and I like the meat and potatoes behind things too, right? So I want to give you guys as much information that you can choose what's going to be a good fit for you. But we also want to explain like why, like give you the reasoning behind it, the science behind it, the resources behind it, as well as inspiring you with our stories, because we also have lived through it. We're not just preaching it, we live in it.
Well, that's right. And we're not just trying to be part of that whole toxic positivity movement that's out there. Like, you know, just be positive without like actually trying to fix anything, which I find just embarrassing as a human being.
Yeah. So if you're still with us here, thank you. We appreciate the support. The biggest motivating factor behind all of this is that we just want people to enhance their lives, and we want to share what we've learned. And we truly believe that this information can spread amongst the masses, and individually and collectively, we can just share healing. That's always been my vision. That's why I started running my business page, is just so people could get free work outside of my office hours, just to keep enhancing their life. Because the more healthy people we have in this world, the healthier the world we have, right?
And that is the end game, right? To have a healthy, functioning society, because right now it's not, no matter what people out there want to think. We'll just leave you with that.
Yeah. Little ways. So today we're going to talk about the body. Okay. So when we talk about integration of a whole bunch of different things, integrating the body into this, the body is like this is our physical existence on this earth, right? So our body, believe it or not, is going to tell us so many things. And because we live in Western society here, we live in the Western hemisphere, Northern hemisphere, Western culture kind of thing. We are very medically dominant in like Western medicine. So that means that your depression, I'm not going to say your depression, your sadness or your fear is not going to be validated as much as your heart palpitations will be. Exactly. And your broken leg or your paralysis is going to get more attention than your grief and your PTSD. Okay. We are coming around in a lot of ways, but again, we connect with the physical body as legitimization of something is wrong. Okay. We want to see that something is wrong. We need proof. Give me the proof. Okay. So with that, we want to talk about, and most of us will validate physical pain more than we will emotional pain. Now, I'm going to tell you guys something. You may not know this. Emotions are expressed in the body.
Yes, they are hugely expressed in the body. You might not even know that your emotions are expressing themselves in the body, but God damn it, they are.
Oh, that lump in your throat, that
Yeah.
pound in your chest, that low back pain that is excruciating. Guess what that is, you guys? That is emotions. That is trauma. That's negative experiences. And I get to see all those patterns and I get to see where commonalities are. And there's lots of different approaches to what that is. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to share a bit of my experience. Jason, you might have some. I don't know. This is where we learn about each other as we like free for all in a podcast here. So for me, one of, I do EMDR work, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing work. And one of the areas we explore is where are you feeling that in your body? And when I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people for hours on end throughout my career here, I start to see patterns where things show up in the body, where certain emotions show up in the body. Okay. For myself, I had this very debilitating low back pain after I had my twins. I had to sit in stagnant positions. I was breastfeeding, like sitting on the floor hours of a day, up all night kind of thing, doing that. And I literally got to a point where I had this some compressed discs at the base of my spine, and there was spurring on them. There was all this stuff, like the x-rays showed it all. But I was like, this is also a mental state that I'm in. I feel like I'm paralyzed because here I was ready to like be mobile with my second kid. My first was a bit of a struggle. And now I feel like I'm paralyzed with these three kids. I can't all hold at the same time. It was such a trip. And then I also, looking back, felt quite paralyzed in the marriage I was in that I'm no longer in. So there was a lot of emotional symbolism there as well. And I knew this wasn't just all physical, even though the x-rays said it was. So for me, being the therapy nerd that I am, I did a lot of EMDR work around that and specific therapy, especially when we had to like cross train on each other and stuff. I was like, we're using my low back. I want to know what is in there. So my pain went from like, an 8 out of 10 some days down to a 4 out of 10 just by processing the emotional stuff that was linked on it. So the 4 out of 10 was my baseline physiological pain. But what made it an 8 out of 10 many days was all of the emotional stuff that was harbored on top of that. Things that I then started to incorporate into my healing that gave me profound effects was also making changes in my life. My kids getting a little older, me leaving that relationship and things like that. However, there was a very distinct treatment that I used that really helped me with some pieces I couldn't unlock, and that was acupuncture. So with that, there was so much anger and resentment that I recognized had gone from my shoulders, because I had like a shoulder and neck injury from my early 20s that lasted for a long time as chronic pain for like 7-8 years. So that was no longer an issue for me, but all of a sudden all this low back pain was, and I just pictured myself stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it until it couldn't go any further, and literally just felt so paralyzed by all that. So I see a lot of low back pain as anger, resentment related. That is not uncommon for a lot of people. We can also have anger, resentment, and then fear, anxieties and stuff sitting in our stomach area. Mm-hmm. Okay. So in the stomach, do we need any other proof that emotional pain and emotional stress causes a physical condition? Except for an ulcer? Like, let's look at that. An ulcer is literally caused by an emotional state. There's our proof in the body right there, right?
Right there. People who have high stress jobs quite typically end up with ulcers.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, when we look at things like IBS and different digestive issues, when I'm working with my clients, I take a very holistic approach and I'll look energetically at some of this stuff. And I'm like, everything you've just told me, it was like you were trying to, when they had trouble speaking up, when they didn't like choose themselves, or, there's a lot of like people pleasing type patterns around, or oppression in the family or the relationship or whatever. And I was like, it was almost like you were trying to digest things that weren't meant to be digested. Hey, and your body was rejecting all of that. And they were like, oh, that is profound. But we start to notice a lot of these patterns. Do you have acid reflux? What is it that you are like not speaking up about? What is happening? Are you just swallowing these resentments? Where are you staying quiet? Where are you not choosing yourself? All these kinds of things. When we look at traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture and the patterns they see in the body that way, that is a whole other podcast. I have dove into that world because it's so fascinating and how it overlaps with a lot of the work I do. And I work with a few of the practitioners in town to kind of, with a lot of my clients, I refer a lot of people for acupuncture because we hit things at a physical level, emotional, spiritual, mental level there. And it is lovely to lay there face down or face up, and just have like this amazing kind of acu-nap meditative state while you're doing it. It's such a beautiful passive way to reset the nervous system and address all of those things. It's the easy way Western culture wants, but with all of the brilliance of Eastern medicine, which has been around way longer than Western medicine, you guys. So that being said, we are often looking at a lot of what is behind the pain, what is behind that, because yes, you will have a physiological x-ray, blood test, whatever it is that says, here's your physical condition. But instead of just taking the pill or taking the treatment or the exercise to do that, look at why it's there. Look at why it's there. None of us want to look at the why.
Well, no, because that's difficult. Then you actually got to face what the real problem is. Then you got to work on yourself. And our society doesn't want to work on itself. It wants to just have the answer handed to them on a silver platter. Just do this. It's like so much, even therapy was based for so long, and I even almost fell victim to it, was like, well, just take this pill. This will fix it.
But here's the thing. What is covered? This is where we're all grabbed by the balls here, because our extended medical systems or basic healthcare, okay, let's look at just basic MSP, will cover the medication, but not the counseling.
Or if you get the counseling, it's 4 sessions, because you know, you can fix everything in 4 easy sessions, right? Like it's like a whole lifetimes of shit in 4 sessions, right?
I can, Jason. I can.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't doubt that.
No,
like this is years worth of work, people.
Yeah. And then people feel like they're really fucked up if they couldn't get it done in 4 sessions.
Yeah,
right?
No, exactly. Right. I mean, yeah, it's fucked up actually, the way that our and you know, and I'm not dissing science, because science has done many wonderful things, but there are many sides to this problem. Science and medicine can only fix one side. The Eastern philosophy is a great way to approach it, because like you say, they've been doing it longer, and it's about getting to the root of the problem.
Eastern medicine is more science than Western, if you ask me. Like, there is so much data, years, thousands of years of data on like interventions and treatments and outcomes. There really is. It's just what we have placed importance of. So like you said, you know, like, we're not anti-science. I'm anti-science as being the only response.
Exactly. And medicine is being the only response.
Totally. We're biological, psychological, spiritual, and mental. Okay. Like, if we wanted to look at things from a medicine wheel perspective, I'm accrediting the indigenous belief system there, right? I'm picturing that medicine wheel right now, but we can look at all of those different realms. Like in Chinese medicine, there's like the 5 elements. There's all of these different ways we can look at things, right? But we cannot just place importance on one of those things. That's like saying the 4-legged stool has one important leg. Yeah, good luck standing on that shit.
Right?
Yeah, right. Like, every bar stool is like lopsided like that. That's like all of us walking around trying to say that is the only way we're going to treat those issues. So that's kind of the thing. Like, it has got a place, but there are also so many other interventions there. So for you, Jason, what kind of like physical health issues throughout all of your stuff, especially when you were like in burnout mode and things like that, what did you notice were like physical things that came up? Because you also are a super physical guy, which I imagine you processed a lot of that out through martial arts and things like that.
Oh yeah. Before I ended up doing martial arts, it was funny actually. I had, and I attribute it now because it was right around the peak burnout phase, and then when my son had just kind of recovered from we got his thyroid issues balanced out. But I was done, and I remember my left foot collapsed overnight. It was fine. I mean, it was fine when I went to bed, and I woke up in the morning, excruciating pain. It had collapsed. I could barely walk. And I remember going to a drop-in clinic because I didn't have a doctor at that point. He had retired. I was waiting to get in. And the doctor at the drop-in clinic said, wow, yeah, your foot's collapsed. There's not really much we can do about it. So you'll never run again. You shouldn't ride your bike. Your physical activities, they're done. You got to figure out other ways. Maybe swim was the only thing he said I could do. And I'm like, oh shit, that blows. And then I kind of like, as time went on, I'm like, that's bullshit. That was just fucking bullshit. And so I kind of, the paper closed. You know, I found another job. I met someone at that job she liked to be active. So we'd go to a boot camp together. And guess what? I was running and doing all this physical exercise at a boot camp. And then I got back on my mountain bike and could do downhill runs. And then I started running regularly. And then 2 months later, I went to boxing. My foot was fine. I just needed to get out of that place that I was in. Like, and that just shows how fucked up that situation was. And medicine's answer was, you just got to stop doing these things you like to do because you can't do them anymore because your left foot collapsed.
Which was the exact opposite of what you actually should have been doing, right? So kudos for listening to that. There's so many people. I love when we have stories where people are like, you're never going to walk again, or you're not going to, and people are like, oh, fuck you, watch me. And I'm like, oh, and I get like, there are physical limitations that we're going to have. But I mean, there's no different than kids who have different abilities growing up. Look at you, Mr. Dyslexia, like writing and publishing.
Right? Like, don't tell me I can't do something, because that's bullshit. And I think that's true with anyone. Yeah, I mean, unless you're paralyzed from the neck down in a car accident. Okay, well, there might be some things you can't do.
And that's the thing. There are going to be things that we can't do, but don't take that as your final answer. Don't take that as your final answer. The other thing there, so what I would do to take that a step further, the way I tend to look at things, I would be like, what is it about the left foot that's different than the right foot? And I Google the shit out of all this stuff and the difference between what that symbolically represents. I believe one foot is about moving into the future and the other one is about staying in the past. So something about that left foot activation would have been that. Also, when we look at right and left side of the body, one has more feminine energy dominance and the other one has more masculine energy dominance. That would be your left foot there. So I would be thinking about some of those kinds of things too. What is it around the masculine wound that might have been activated and things like that? So I take every single layer and just kind of like throw any possible thing in there so we can look at it from like a really holistic point of view, right? Yeah. Oh, and
absolutely.
Like plantar fasciitis, things like that are, I feel like, and I'm just going off the top of my head right now, but it's like you're carrying too many burdens for other people. And it's almost like that pressure of flattening the arch. And it is, you're almost, you're carrying too much for other people. That's kind of like a big theme of that sort of foot injury. And
and what's funny about that is I have had plantar fasciitis issues all through my 20s. After my father passed away, etc., and sorting that out, and and having like anyways, a whole bunch of shit that went on there. But it's funny now, I don't have any plantar fasciitis issues.
Amazing.
Now that I've worked through all that stuff.
Yeah, honestly. And so like, it's really fascinating just to see that. And I bet you people, as you're listening right now, I want you to go and like inventory your kind of chronic or reoccurring health conditions, like, and think about maybe the stages of your life and when they passed and what that looked like. For me, I had this chronic pain injury that, according to all the doctors I had gone to for years, and it was a big ICBC case that, that was chronic. It was never going to improve. It was never going to, well, those are not significant issues for me, but when they come up, holy man, you better believe that I'm like, what just blasted me from the past here? And sometimes it can be driving in winter, having somebody approach beside me, or like different things like that. And I'm like, my body literally just recalled all of that back to square one. And our body will hold trauma experiences, cellular memory from lots of different things. And I'll probably talk about this in a grief segment later on where we talk about deathversaries and things like that. But my body very much, 22 years later, lives through things physically in a lot of similar ways. So I want you all to think about that right now, inventory those kinds of things in your life. I always ask people like, what time of year did that accident happen? Or what time of year did this happen? Or, especially things even related to birth traumas and stuff like that, right? Whatever kind of issues. I always like to get people kind of thinking about what is my body trying to tell me? So some resources for that, some really great resources that people might want to just kind of dive a little bit more into. So The Body Keeps the Score is a massive book, but it's very science-based, talks about a ton of different components. If you really want to dive into like the ways the body keeps the score, that would be a genius book to do if you were ballsy enough to like go through the content of it. I audiobook it because it's just so much easier. It's a big one. Bessel van der Kolk is the one who wrote that. And then another one, more familiar name for people because he's from Vancouver. He's a doctor from the downtown east side. Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Cost of Stress. So those are really great resources. Again, if people want to dive into some, traditional Chinese medicine knowledge, or if you kind of feel sparked by a little bit of the connection there, get yourself booked in. What's actually amazing is that many extended medical plans have really good coverage for acupuncture, which is also a testament to how much it's being respected in the medical field, right? So that I think many plans give acupuncture as much coverage as physio and massage, which is incredible.
Well, it is. It's almost, I think it is viewed as another form of physio now. Even
Yeah.
though it's a spiritual thing, really, in the end, and it's energy
Yeah.
lines, but people see it as physio.
And it's not all of that. Like I said, there's so many years of actual data based on measurable data around this person came in with this condition. They came in like pneumonia and lots of physiological conditions. And they just are able to, again, look at bringing the system back into balance. We are always in a state of equilibrium. If we are too hot, our body's going to do something to try and cool us down. We sweat, we do all of these things. If we are too highly activated, so our nervous system, right? When the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, is activated, we want to then counter it by going into the parasympathetic. What do we do in order to do that, right? What parts of our bodies interact? You start to do, the vagus nerve, those kinds of things. So we're always in this state of balance, right? We're trying to perfect example, alcohol. So did people know that when you drink alcohol, your body, it's a depressant in your body, which means it brings it down. So your body releases almost like an adrenaline type response to counter that, to bring it back into balance. That response lasts longer than the effects of alcohol. So if you've had 3 drinks and the effects of that are, let's say 4.5 hours, 5 hours or something, your rebound effect of that other biological response to counter the depressant actually lasts longer than that. So that's why you're waking up at 2 a.m. and you're like, why can't I sleep? And it's because alcohol depressant effect wore off. This is called the rebound effect, you guys. But your body's compensatory effect is like in its peak still, which is why you're waking up in the middle of the night. So those are the kinds of things where our body's constantly in balance. And that's really like one of the underlying kind of principles of the traditional Chinese medicine approach and Eastern medicine in general, the yin yang. Everyone used to wear a cool ring in the 90s. Did you have one, Jason?
No, I think I had a pendant though.
He's holding up his Saheki Reiki pendant, actually.
That's my current one, yes.
Reiki, and that's all around, again, life force energy. Qi is like the basis of acupuncture kind of stuff as well. So yeah, I mean, it's fascinating when we can start looking at alternative ways of understanding why our body is doing certain things, right? Why our body reacts a certain way, then why our brain does a certain thing. And we are just, for some reason, we give so much credit and weight to the body stuff. And then we also use that as like a big crutch, a big hindrance. Well, I can't because my leg, or I can't because my back. And it's like, fuck, why don't you just say I can't because I'm feeling sad today, or I'm stressed, or I'm worried about this, or I'm worried about that. But instead, guess what's going to happen? It's going to show up as a bellyache, because that's what happened when you were 5 and you were like, I don't have words for this weird feeling. I'm scared to go to school, or I'm scared to see that person, but I don't know what this feeling is. Oh, that's my belly getting upset, right?
Oh, my son does that all the time. He thinks he's got the flu, but no, kid, you're just nervous.
and being able to identify it as that. But what happened when we were younger is we were taught to override that. Oh, this is what we're meant to talk about right now. We were meant to override that. So it was like, no, don't worry about it. Go to school. So then you learned this uncomfortable feeling, which essentially is like an intuitive response of worry. Okay. It's showing up in my gut as nervousness. If someone would have said, you're worried, this is what worry, or this is what fear feels like, let's do something to help you feel less fearful. And sometimes that's about coming up with other solutions, talking about a couple of worst case scenarios, and then coming up with the opposite. Sometimes it's just self-soothing stuff, right? Reassurance. Whatever it be. If someone sat down with us and did that, then we would go, oh, body activation, explore it, resolve it. But when we were growing up, Jason, and I mean, you got a decade on me here, but you like, go to fucking school.
Yeah. And I still find myself doing it with my kid. Like, no, you're nervous. Go to fucking school.
You're at least fitting some explanation onto it.
Yeah.
You're nervous and you still have to go to school. That is like so validating. At least I know what this is. Because if I go and I don't know what this is, that sucks. And then especially during COVID, if I have an upset belly, people are going to think I have COVID, and that makes the anxiety 10 times worse, right?
And then you're home for a week, just even though you're perfectly fine.
Right? My son would be playing basketball in the middle of like January in the driveway and be like, Mom, I've got a runny nose. And I'm like, because you were just outside in the cold. He's like, people are going to think I have COVID.
Yeah, right. Everybody had COVID at that point. Like, right. Just because you had a runny nose or you were whatever.
As you'd been outside. But the biggest thing is like we were taught at a very young age to override our body systems, and our body is going to light up like the dashboard of our car. Okay. When you get into your car, again, what kind of driver are you? You've got a low tire, you need washer fluid. I sadly let that shit go for a while because I just don't have time to fill it up. That is a love language in itself, you guys. If your partner needs some washer fluid, fucking put it in for her. That'll get you perks in the bedroom, in my opinion. I'm like, I just don't have time. So, are you running around with this lit up dashboard, or do you tend to the warning signs as they come up? Most of us don't. We will treat our car like a gem and like, oh, look at my passenger door's open, so I'm going to close the door before I drive. But we don't do that to our bodies. It's like, oh, my heart's racing, my stomach's upset this morning. Oh, well, I'll go, right?
Just go do it.
Totally. So I want people to start thinking about that, where you're overriding your system. Your body is essentially your dashboard. It is going to tell you where shit is going wrong. Okay. How well are you listening to it, or are you overriding it? Do you have headaches reoccurring that you just take Tylenol for, right? What's happening hormonally? What's happening dietary wise? What's happening trauma wise? One of my sessions this morning was a gal who said, oh my gosh, since we've been working together, I realized that my exercise-induced migraines weren't actually exercise-induced migraines. They were trauma coming up, and I was processing as I was walking. And people will learn about this as I talk about right-left brain processing, bilateral stimulation. When we're hiking, walking, doing things that use both sides of our bodies, we naturally go into a processing state. She was probably blasting through a bunch of things. Her body would get stressed because it's also physically exerted. That activates the sympathetic nervous system that says, oh my God, I'm in danger. And boom, migraine shuts you down because nothing else will. I'll give you a debilitating migraine, so you shut the fuck down.
Yeah.
So she no longer has that response, but that was a medically diagnosed response. This is what happens. You just can't exercise as extreme anymore. Well, what it essentially was dissociation. It was my breaker panel is like blown because I was at maximum capacity and didn't stop or regulate myself. But through her trauma work with me over just a short few months, that was something that started to resource more, regulate more, and then made those connections and stops herself before she gets to the breaking point. It's like phenomenal when we really start listening to our bodies and understanding why it's doing certain things.
And I think it's important too, like a lot of people don't realize this, and I'm aware enough that I did, but when I went and met my biological brother and sister for the first time, I went to the coast, first real trip to the coast after COVID. Very stressful time to meet people you've never met before. I mean, my average heart rate was about 140 the whole weekend. So guess what happened when I got home? I got fucking sick for a week.
Yeah.
Because I needed to stop and rest. And quite often when we do, like there are times you catch a virus, sure. But a lot of the time when you do get cold-like symptoms after a period of high stress, it's your body trying to tell you, stop and recuperate. You need to take a break.
And now it's okay to take a break, because if you got sick there, you wouldn't have been able to. I work with quite a few people who have gone through cancer treatments, and they are like at the top of their game during those treatments. And I'm like, that's because your body is in warrior mode. It cannot get sick, be tired, do any of these things. They're like, I felt fine during treatments. It's now that I'm crashed. I said, yeah, because you're not on the battlefield. This is the way it should be. Your body was not meant to rest during those treatments. It was fighting. Now you have to let it put its guards down. You have to tend to it. You have to nourish it. Even though you're over the cancer, or you feel like you're over that hurdle, your body has to recover. You're done the marathon now. Take the fucking break, right? But because they're out of treatments, they want to start living again, right? And I'm like, no, listen to your body, and some other things is around just like cycle wisdom and stuff. And this is a whole nother topic in itself. Those of you who follow me on my Instagram page, or just like work with me personally. And in my workshop, I talk a lot about this, especially women. But, our cycles, our menstrual cycles also sync with the moon cycles. And those are very, energetically aligned in terms of having productive times and less productive times. So I'll just give you a quick snapshot. Masculine energy, and I'm not talking gender, I'm talking about masculine, feminine energy systems, but masculine energy functions on a 9 to 5 schedule. They're a 24-hour clock. You replenish 24 hours a day, the masculine energy does. The feminine energy replenishes every 28 days, which is usually what most of our cycles are. So we have productive times and less productive times, more rest times throughout a month, but we are trying to work within a 9 to 5, 24-hour energy cycle because we live in a patriarch society. So again, your body is being forced to do something against what its natural cycle is. So there's all these other pieces that also interplay with things too. It's so important for us to know our bodies, and we are very disconnected from them, very, unless you started meditating after last week's session, and now you're starting to get more connected with your body, aren't you?
Well, I like that with bringing it together, integrating the two concepts.
You know what, you guys, you were getting like a course at a time. So by the time we are like through so many topics in this podcast, we have this massive buffet where you get to just load your plate with everything that fits. You're going to have all the food groups there.
I love it. I love it. Which brings us to the end of this episode of Integrating This podcast. And what a great episode it was. Like there's lots of good stuff we covered here that's very important. And I feel we're going to come back to it in various future episodes as well.
Yeah, I got super jazzed up there. I forgot what I talked about.
Yeah, I know, I did too. I will review it and let you know.
Guys, so Jason and I are both like pretty divinely led in like kind of the way our inspiration comes in. For me, I know a lot of my ideas come from outside of myself sometimes. So I'll start talking and I'm like, what did I just say? I know it was really good and it was what I was supposed to say in the moment, but I'm not entirely sure. That's what we also love about not scripting these, is what comes forward is supposed to come forward. So thanks for like sticking with us on this, and we try and keep it as organized as possible, and it does flow. But if it seems a little disconnected sometimes, or like, where did that just come from? It's probably because like that's literally what happened, is where the hell did that just come from? But I think
what makes this, it does, and it all fits together as a perfect little package in the end.
It really does. So the packages, I don't know. Body, guys.
On that note, we'll be back again next week with a whole new topic, a little course for you. Until then, I'm Jason.
I'm Jolene.
Talk to you next week.